clarifying questions. When doing research, you ask questions and then see if you can find answers in previously published books and articles.
Oh, sorry.
Hey, have you ever
Oh, my
walked into a
goodness.
party
How did I do that?
in a conversation? By reading the work of scholars in your field, you're listening to the conversation and getting ready to ask your own questions. In a conversation, you ask clarifying questions. When doing research, you ask questions and then see if you can find answers in previously published books and articles. In a conversation, you engage and respond with your informed point of view. When doing research, interacting or joining the conversation might be you writing a paper, creating a poster, designing a study, making art, getting a patent, or just giving a presentation.
Okay, that's me. You're having a conversation. I'm going to have to stop sharing for a second to go back to my slides. Okay, so what I want to talk about is how to get to the library, what kind of things are in there. And this slide represents a screenshot of a portion of the library homepage, the Van Houten Library. And we also have the Littman Library, the two physical locations, but all of the material is available on either website that is electronic or a guide to what's in print. So we have about 150,000 print books, but for the last many years, we've been buying more and more ebooks. And because of COVID, of course, we've really focused on the ebooks. So we have another 150,000 ebooks available. Almost everything else included in the databases, which are articles, reports, book reviews, such and things like that, those are almost exclusively electronic now. So you can do all of your research from anywhere. When you're on campus, you're authenticated. Remember, I said a lot of this published material, maybe I didn't, a lot of the published material that the library has is something that has to be paid for, right? So you may not realize the university spends $1.5 million plus every year buying access to materials that are not free on the web. So, you know, when you hit that paywall, when you're on Google Scholar or Google and ask you to pay, well, you shouldn't have to pay. The library is here to support the curriculum, education, and research. And so if we haven't already subscribed to the thing you need, you can request it through this interlibrary loan tab over here. So I'm going to get into a little more detail, but the first thing I want to say is that a lot of our material is organized into databases. So a database is just a collection of material, right? So it be all books, it could be just chemistry, as is SciFinder, it could be just engineering, as is Novel, it could be Scopus, that is just scholarly, but every subject. And Google Scholar is not an NJIT database, but a filter on Google that allows you to filter out everything that is not scholarly in nature. And these things work together. As I said, you'll be using the web and you'll be using the library databases. So I'm going to go live now to the library homepage and just show you a little bit about how each of these things works. Let me get there. Okay. Oops, things are in the way. Okay. And if you, well, I default to the library homepage as my homepage, but if you don't know where it is, you can just Google it, NJIT Library. You get to the Van Houten Library, and here we have that same launch pad. Search everything searches almost all of the library databases, but not all. And it's a sort of a blunt tool, but it's a great place to start. Books Plus searches all of our books and videos that we actually have purchased or you can have access to. This search everything does not restrict it to things that only we have access to. So you might find additional things which you might have to request. Databases gives access through a particular service, a database. I call the database services are sort of like streaming services, right? So if you subscribe to Netflix and Prime, you might have the same show or the same movie on both services, right? So databases are sort of like that. There's some overlap, right? So if you have a general database and a narrowly focused database, they might still have the same article in it. we get rid of the duplicates for you in the searching when you use Search Everything. Nevertheless, databases also are containers, right? So they may contain a book review. They may contain a journal, which comes out periodically. All periodicals are things that come out regularly: newspapers, magazines, and scholarly journals, right? And these things may have issues, right? Every month an issue comes out, every day the newspaper comes out, and they might have articles within those issues. So these words are not interchangeable. Databases contain journals and books. Journals contain issues. Issues contain articles, right? Just like a streaming service may contain a TV show, and it may have a season, and it may have an episode. It's just the same kind of idea. Journals is just a list of all of the journals, all the periodicals, journals, magazines, and newspapers that we have subscriptions to. So the only thing you can put in here is a title of a magazine or a newspaper or a scholarly journal. So if you want to know if we have chemical engineering news, that's or let's say you get an assignment, you're in a business class, do we have the Harvard Business Review? That's the only thing you can type in there. People mistakenly look for articles in there because it says journals, and they're confused whether a journal means an article, but actually it just tells you where the Harvard Business Review is online. And when you go there, you are asked to authenticate if you're off campus, as I am right now. And then you are put into the issues for the Harvard Business Review, going as far back as we have them, and you can also search just within that publication. Okay, so that's the last thing I want to mention on here is research guides, which is our librarians have put together many self-help tutorials and guides to doing things. Roadmaps is the one that everybody gets to know because it's for freshman seminar and HUM 101, 102. This is a very good guide to all of the things that you have to do when writing a paper, just generally, regardless of the subject. And then we also have many subject guides. So if you're a mechanical engineering major and you have to look up things for some reason, you can go to the guide specific for mechanical engineering and see right away which are the databases that are most appropriate for your subject. And here's Ray Vasquez. He's our librarian for mechanical engineering. So each field has a librarian assigned to it. Okay, so I want to go back to my slide here, and I'm going to move ahead. And we already did this. So let's see, when referring to a database, a journal and a scholarly article, which is true. So take a shot at Mentee here. Please respond if anybody's having trouble, type in the chat, or if you have a question. I love those flying dots. Okay, so a database can be a searchable collection of scholarly research articles, but it doesn't have to be all scholarly material. It also includes books, magazines, newspapers, reports, all kinds of things, statistics. Lots of things are in our databases that are not necessarily technically scholarly materials. A journal is a periodical which contains published scholarly research articles, that is for sure. The words database, journal, and article are not really interchangeable. A database is a container for journals, which is a container for articles. And databases may also contain other things, as I said already. Okay, a scholarly article is a paper written by a scholar. That's a terrible definition, but that's true. I would say a researcher or a specialist in the field. A magazine may be considered scholarly, not really. By definition, a magazine is something that is popular, or more importantly, it is not edited and vetted in the same way as scholarly journals are. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. And a book is maybe scholarly, but not always. Think of all the how-to books or, PCs for dummies or whatever, these kinds of things, novels. Those aren't necessarily scholarly material. So what is scholarly? Let me talk about that for a minute. Okay, when we say scholarly, or sometimes people say academic articles, okay, what we really mean is that they have been peer reviewed. Peer review is a process by which your professors who are doing research publish their work and have it reviewed by other scholars in their own field before it's published, right? So when your professor doing his research, does an experiment, he gets his results, he writes it up, and with his team or whoever, they send it to a scholarly journal for review. And that editor sends it to several, looks around, tries to find people in the same field who would understand what is often very narrow and technical. And they find some reviewers and they send these papers that were submitted to those reviewers. And those reviewers are usually anonymous. So the scholar who wrote the paper and the scholar who's reviewing the paper, they don't know who the other person is. And so they can be as candid as they would like. And then the reviewer may say one of several things. They may say, wow, that's amazing findings. Publish this right away. That's our recommendation to the editor. And then they may say, well, this is very interesting, but on page 2, I have some concerns about this, that, or the other. Maybe it needs a little revision. Or maybe they say, this is hogwash. We don't think you should publish it, and here's why we think that. And this may go back to the authors, and they may revise it, they may resubmit it, it may get reviewed again, and it may get accepted or rejected, right? So your professors are judged on their ability to publish their research and have it vetted by other scholars in their field. That's scholarly research. So if a journal is called peer-reviewed, that's what it means. If something's popular, it doesn't mean that the quality is bad. It just means it's gone through a different process for vetting, okay? So in a popular magazine like Popular Science, which has the word popular in it, or Scientific American, or a newspaper like the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, any of them, they're written by journalists. They may or may not be experts, but they do the research. They write the article up and they send it to, and they publish it. They go through several editorial reviews within the company, the name, the organization that publishes the magazine, and that's the end of it, right? So that's the difference. There are also some other kinds of publications in broad categories. One is trade publications, which are like popular publications in that they are written by journalists and go through editorial review, but not peer review. Same thing with reports. They may be written by consultants, government agencies. They may be very good quality. They may have been reviewed internally, but they aren't what we call peer-reviewed scholarly articles, okay? So trade publications are usually things that you'll be reading, you will surely be reading when you are in your field because they have trends. They're often called newsletters, right? Or magazine. Even this is called Tech Journal, but it's not actually a journal because it's a newsletter, a magazine for people in the tech industry. So when you are, those often have job notices and they're very important for a person in the field, but they're not peer reviewed. And so they're not inferior, they're just different. Okay, so from the titles here, take a guess. Which of these might be scholarly sources? Can't always tell from the title, but we're going to try. Okay, so let me talk about them. Well, the New York Times is a newspaper. Newspapers, we said, are popular sources, not scholarly. They may have very interesting articles, they may be well written and well researched, and they may refer to scholarly sources. Sometimes you see in the New York Times an attribution to a study by Professor so and so at MIT who just made a better car battery, right? But it is not scholarly source itself. Chemical Engineering Journal, yes, the word journal is a tip-off. If you remember, we had one that wasn't. It said journal and title, but it actually was a trade magazine. So you can't always tell, but it's a good guess. Um, Scientific American Magazine, like the New York Times, is a popular source, not scholarly, even though it has the word scientific in the title. American Chemical Society newsletter. Remember, I said newsletter is something that's a trade publication. It is something that has trends, job ads, very interesting articles, maybe, but it is not go through the articles do not go through the peer review process as they do for Chemical Engineering Journal. Now let's get to the last two. These are very interesting cases. So the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection data set is data collected by the EPA in New Jersey, right? So it may be very high quality, but it probably does not go through the peer review process. It probably goes through an internal process for vetting and collection and vetting, right? So itself, it's not necessarily a scholarly source. Now, if a guy from a professor from NJIT uses this data set and does some statistical analysis and figures out something that they didn't know before, and he publishes that article about it using this data, his article is probably published in a scholarly source, but the data itself isn't scholarly. Okay, now the last one is the most difficult, I would say, from the title, the International Conference on Space Science Communication. So there are many, many conferences with very narrow focus or very broad, depending on the field or what they want to do. And some of them are scholarly, and that means that in order to present a paper at the conference, your professor has to send it in ahead of time, and it has to be reviewed by his peers, and then it has to be accepted for presentation at the conference. If, on the other hand, it's a commercial conference, maybe this conference was sponsored by the satellite companies or by somebody who just wants to make a conference and make money. That's a business venture. And that may still be legitimate conference. It still may be very interesting and worthwhile. Some of them are quite famous, but in order to present a paper, you probably just have to submit one. And unless the editors of the have signed on the conference to review things and decide, most likely you'll be able to present your paper because they want more rather than less. So you can't tell from this title necessarily if it's a scholarly conference, but it very well might be. So that shows you have to dig a little deeper, and that means going to the website and looking around and seeing what is going on with this particular source. Okay, so here we are back at the library, and I want to talk about something else now, and that is how you enter a search in the library database. So when you're using Google, you can use a sentence. You could type a sentence in, you get a really good answer most of the time, and that is fantastic, and nobody likes this more than the librarians. I mean, I use it 100 times a day, just like probably you all do. However, when you're using a library database, now remember, we still need to mine our data out of here. We need it. You can't type a sentence in. It used to be that if you typed in a sentence, you would get 0 results, even though there was plenty of information in the database. So they sort of fixed the algorithm so you get some results, but they're usually not very good. So what you have to do to search a library database is you have to use keywords and keyword phrases, just like the ones listed here. As an example, heat transfer and packed beds. If you want to go a step further, you can put quotation marks around a phrase to search it as an exact string. So if you wanted heat transfer, because heat and transfer are really very similar, very different meaning from heat transfer, right? Same thing with packed beds. Packed and beds could be about packing up and going on a trip and staying in a hotel with 2 beds in your room, right? So you have to usually you do better. If a phrase is meaningful because it has a specific meaning, then you should usually use quotation marks. And that, by the way, works in Google too. If you put quotes around a phrase in Google, you will often get a better result. Okay. The next thing you can do in the library databases is refine your results. Google doesn't really let you do this much. There's an advanced search, so you can target your results a little bit better, but you can't necessarily slice and dice your results set. So here, if you can't see it, we got almost 13,000 results. And in this first one, there are a lot of little icons here that allow you to look for the references that are in the article, look for references that cite this article that came out after it was published. This was published in 2016. So if you wanted to get things about this subject that were written later than 2016, you could click this little icon. We have citation button, we have a permalink button, lots of things. And sometimes when it's not available, we even have a link right to request it from Interlibrary Loan, which is our free service to get things that we don't have. Then the filters on the left allow you to eliminate things. Let's say your professor said you can only use peer-reviewed articles. There you have a button you can click and filter just for peer-reviewed. You can filter for just available online, right? So you're off campus, you're not coming to the library. Anyway, all the articles are only available online. So that would eliminate the ones that we don't have, right? If it doesn't say available online, it means the NJIT library doesn't have immediate access to it. And then last but not least, that interlibrary loan. I think I mentioned that. So the first time you sign up for interlibrary loan, it will ask you to register. That's just so we know who you are and we can keep track of what who to send the item to. But otherwise, it's free. Okay. I think I mentioned these. These are little symbols to find the references in the paper, which, as you know, lead you to more things, and cited articles that are written afterwards, and of course the citation button, which everybody loves. It's in Google Scholar as well. And in most of the databases that we have, there's a way to cite your source automatically. Now, remember, this is just a computer. It's just matching words. So if you have an idea what those words mean, it may not be what the article is about, right? So it's a process of figuring out what's in the database, especially when you first start, you have no idea. Okay, so let's try it. Everybody, Google NJIT Library, go to the library and search for a peer-reviewed recent article on the effects of methane on climate change. And let me know the name of the journal in which it was published and the year. Okay, so let's see if you can identify from the reference in the library database. First, you'll have to filter for peer-reviewed. You'll have to put in the correct keywords to get an article on this subject. And then you'll have to understand which scholarly source it was published in. So give it a shot. If you have any questions, you can type them in the chat or you can unmute yourself and speak. Okay, so people are pasting in the entire citation, but what I'm asking you for is the name of the journal in which it appeared. So a couple of people did that and the date, right? Limnology and Oceanography, Nature Communications, and the date. These three look like complete citations or article titles. 21st Century Climate Change in the European Alps, a review. That sounds like the title of the paper. And then maybe the science of the total environment. I don't actually know if that's the journal name, but maybe it is. And then in this case, this also is the title of the article rather than the publication in which it appeared. This is a full citation with the authors, the year, the title of the journal, of the paper, interactions between methane, blah, blah, and then the journal name, Current Opinion in Environmental Sustainability. Volume 9, Issue 10, October. Here are the pages, right? So that's a full citation. It's not what I asked for. So sometimes you have to know the name of the journal and separate it from the name of the, so just copy and pasting. You also have to review what you copy and paste. So for example, here's one, Science China Earth Sciences. Okay, that sounds like the journal name, but Science China is in all caps. That's incorrect in APA style, and that's because the computer is just dumb. And if it translates, doesn't translate and fix the capitalization or the punctuation necessarily. So capitalization rules are different for APA than MLA and so on, but none of them have all caps. So after you, okay, review of geophysics, that's good. I don't know what the 1985 means as opposed to 2017. Okay, so given a little more information than I asked for, but the point is to recognize the journal name from the title of the article. This is important. They're both titles, but they're at different levels in different parts of the container, right? And it sometimes helps you to figure out how to find the thing. If you don't know which thing you're looking for, you may put the wrong thing in the wrong box. As I showed you with the journal name, if you put the title of the article in the journal name box on the library homepage, you will get nothing, right? So let's just go over this again. I'm going to the library homepage here. And I'm going to put in methane, and there it is right there. And oh, here's another thing. So if you have synonyms, you can use an or to connect them. So I'll take anything that uses the word climate change or the words global warming, but it must have the word methane. So that's another advanced search technique. Google sort of assumes an or, but Google also uses ands. You can use a plus sign for an and you can use a minus sign for a not to get rid of things that are not relevant. Okay, so here we have one, peer reviewed. Okay, so let's take a look at it. And here you can either clip the citation or you can just look at this. Here are the authors. This is the title. Here are the authors. And this is the source in which it appeared. Global Biogeochemical Cycles. If you look down here, usually here is part of, it's even more clear that that is the journal source, year, volume, issue, pages. Okay. And when you get into a record by clicking on the title, you can also see other words that are used, other subjects, other keywords, and that can be extremely helpful. Usually there's a description as well. Okay, so let's go back to our Mentee. Okay, so here again we have Directory of Open Access Journals is a database, not the journal name. So you would have to look there again and see this is the title of the article, this is the database in which it's found, but you're missing the journal name. Soaring methane emissions, that looks like the title. This one has limnology and oceanography, but it also has the title of the article. This one is also the title of the article plus the journal name, Science China Earth Sciences. This is important to distinguish. Okay. So now, well, let me show you Scopus first before I make you do something. So when we go to the library homepage, one of our top databases, we have a drop-down list with the most heavily used databases because we have over 100 databases. And when you're starting, you don't know which one to use, right? If you later know which one to use, you can go right to it. Databases A through Z, you know, Statista has statistics in it. You can go A through Z, S for Statista, and you get right there. Scopus is full of only scholarly material. It's interdisciplinary. It's a very good database. So if we go to Scopus and we put our methane search in here, let's just do that. You will find, oh, I got 4,820 documents. It has different filters, which can be excellent because they have some by subject area, which is really good. And then they also have the feature of, was this paper cited? And you can change the sort order. So you could get the most important paper with 3,000 citations since 2011, Solutions for a Cultivated Planet. That might be a very useful paper. A lot of people have found it so, right? So here we have the article itself, the abstract and the information about the article. And then we can check for full text. If we want to see if we have it, we can scroll down and look at the references that were in the paper, just like in the other database, although it just looks a little different, the same features and the same, how many citations did it get? And then here it goes on and on. You can look at all of the citations. You can also set alerts in our databases. So if you're watching a particular subject in the news or in research, you can set up a permanent search. Okay, so here's a way to check for full text. If you're in the library, you will automatically get the paper. Sometimes it just opens. Whoops, it's doing nothing. It's loading. If it doesn't appear, this is connected to all of our other databases. So if it appears somewhere else on the library website, it should open up. It's having a little trouble. And if you aren't sure or it doesn't come up, you can always go to Google Scholar and see if somebody has put it out there on the web. Well, we got a little error there. Let's go to Google Scholar. Here's Google Scholar. Looking for this paper. Here it is. It's in Nature. And because I'm at home, let's see if I'm going to get I got it. Maybe it's on the open web. You have full access via the New Jersey Institute of Technology. I got it because I'm on the VPN and it thinks I'm on the campus network for some reason. Okay. All right. So let's try it. Go to Scopus. Remember, it's on the databases drop-down list. Voting is closed. No, I don't want to do that. I want to open it. Find this paper, right, by this author and see how many references are at the end of that paper. Scopus will tell you that right away. Does everybody remember where to look? Okay, sometimes we have the copycat syndrome. Okay, let's take a look. So here we have Scopus. I'm going to search on Scopus. I'm going to put that title in there. Is searching the title, the abstract, and the keywords. And I might add the author to Shoemaker. Change this to the author field. Okay, so I'm doing some fielded searching here with some Boolean logic and hopefully I'll get this paper. I got the paper. And remember I said if you click on the title, you will see the abstract and the references. So how many references are there? We can scroll to the bottom and we see there are indeed 40 references. When you're in Scopus, these references can be hot links, which can be very useful when you're doing research because you're just hopping around from one paper to another. And remember, each one of these papers also tells you how many documents cite it. So if we went back there, well, let's just do the next one, which is the next question. This is a picture of Scopus, which I just showed you. Now, let's see how many papers cite this article. In other words, they were written after the article was published. Remember, this is just in the Scopus universe, right? So if you did this same search in Google Scholar, let me just do that for a second. Let's put that title in there. Now here we say it was cited by 30. And here, by the way, is the citation button in Google Scholar. And if I wanted to find these 30 papers, I could also search within these papers, search within the citing papers or not. Okay, so in Scopus, if we look at Scopus entry here, we see they've only found 19. And that's because the universe of papers in Scopus is smaller than the universe of papers in, and the other thing about Google Scholar is it also, by accident, the algorithm includes lots of things, duplicates and other things that are not necessarily scholarly citations. So in Scopus, these are actual scholarly papers that cited it, not just a mention somewhere or a duplicate, which happens in Google Scholar. So the Google numbers are very inflated, but they're still very useful for finding things. Okay, so the answer was 19. Some people found that. Okay, now I'm going to talk a little bit about citing. So let me just say that I used to work in a big company, a big telecommunications company, one of the predecessors to Verizon, and nobody put citations in their work. We wrote lots of reports, we did lots of research, we made lots of presentations, and we in fact, I was the head of the research unit, and we never put citations in, very rarely. However, in the universe of academia, we've all agreed it's an academic convention. We're going to put the references in right up front so we don't have to ask, where did you get that? So when you're in a company, as many of you may be, or in a situation where you have to make a presentation or write a report, you may not have to put the references in. You probably won't. But when you're standing up there, you give your presentation, everybody says, wow, that was so interesting. Oh, we'll probably make a lot of money doing that. Just what you said, great idea. But could you go back, somebody says, could you go back to slide 4? Where did you get that data so that you based all these assumptions on? And you are not going to say, I Googled it. Well, you may have Googled it, but the answer that you need to give is like, where did you get it? And why is it reliable, right? So you would say, oh, it's part of the census data. Granted, it's 10 years old, but we don't have any more current information. We think the trends will continue because of XYZ, right? You have to give an intelligent answer. And by the same token, when you're in the audience, you're going to question it, right? Just like that person questioned me. You want to have that and those antenna up, always looking for like, who said this and why should I believe it? Who researched this and why should I believe them? Is their method good? Was their statistics correct? You know, were they correct? So that's it, right? That's why we do this. And in academia, we're going to follow certain convention to put it right out there up front. And that means that you always have to have two parts to your references in a scholarly work. One is in the text, an abbreviated reference that leads you to the full reference at the end of the paper, whether they're numbered or whether they're APA style, where the author's name is actually in the in-text citation. That's this little one here, right? So this is full of in-text citations. Even the table has a citation, or I guess that's a hot link, but the table probably does have a citation. Here it is, right? Ibar de Sul et al., 2009. Now, if you remember from high school, MLA usually puts the page number in the in-text citation. In STEM and social sciences, the page number is not important because what's important are the ideas. What did they do? What did they find out in the research? In the humanities, the text is the subject of the discussion, and therefore we're quoting quite often so that we can discuss the text, right? That's the subject of the discussion. Here, the subject is ideas, and therefore you will find very few quotations in social science and STEM research, which is mostly what you'll be doing here. And it also leads to better writing. So what you're going to do is you're going to summarize the ideas you find in your own words. You're going to put that in-text citation in parentheses at the end of that, and then you're going to have a corresponding list at the end in alphabetical order by last name, and you're going to make the correspondence between what's in the text and what's at the end of the text, right? So just because you read a lot of things, if you're not using them in your text, you're not putting them in your references. So you shouldn't have extraneous references. Everybody knows that you read a lot more than you're citing, right? So don't fill up your references at the end thinking it's just a bibliography of everything you read in order to write the paper. It is not. Okay, so the other thing that's very important is to use your own words, as I said. And if you do a lot of cutting and pasting of abstracts or sections of the paper or whatever the source is, in your notes, you will probably be, it will be hard not to copy those words. You're setting yourself up for copying and getting in trouble for no good reason, right? So this is something a lot of students do. It's called patch writing. Oh, the author wrote it so much better than I could say it. So I'll just copy that, I'll quote it, and then I'll use it in my paper. And then a lot of students have papers that are just a series of quotations strung together from the various sources they read. It's not their own writing. It's not very good. Even if it's paraphrased, it's usually not easy to read and it's not necessary. So I recommend that you, when you get a paper or a source that you find interesting, clip the citation right away, put it on your notes page, and then right under it, write down what's important about that paper and why you saved it. And then you will be writing from your notes instead of from somebody else's words. Okay, same thing for figures and tables. They have to be cited in exactly the same way, right? Here's the little in-text citation and the corresponding reference at the end. Here's an example of a reference in APA style for an academic paper, the authors, the title of the article, right? The name of the journal, in this case it's abbreviated, which isn't always helpful. And then some journals require it that way. Each journal may have its own specifications for how to present the citations, but this is trivial. What's important is that all the elements are there. Author, article title, publication title, right? What they're calling article source, the year, and the publication information. If there's a volume and a page number, those have to be included. no longer do we include URL and accession date for something that's published, because if you remember what I said earlier, it may appear in many of these different databases, right? It's not relevant where it was. It's the same article. It's not going to change, just like the movie. The movie is, the Matrix is the Matrix. Wherever you find it and watch it, it doesn't really matter when you watched it. It's not changing. The same thing is true of published articles and books. Okay, so we don't really need the URLs. For websites, we definitely need the URLs, but then again, that's not enough. You still need the title of the article, the title of the web page, the title of the website, and hopefully the author or the sponsor of that website, and then the URL. So in case it all falls apart, the URL changes, the thing disappears, we'll still know where you got that information. And you can find it yourself again. Okay, here we have two examples, images, which one has the citation correct and which one does not. Take a look. And then we can, is that option 1 or option 2 with the in-text citation prominently displayed? Yep, let's see. Okay, you can vote. Yep, that's it. Here we have this in-text citation right here at the end. This one has a title of the figure, but no citation. Maybe they drew that themselves. That's possible. So I could be wrong about this. Okay, let's just forget this. Okay, what do you need to write a citation? Here are mostly all the elements of a citation. Let's see. See those flying dots? Now, if it's a book, you won't have the two titles, you'll have one title, right? The title and then the publisher becomes the source. Whereas with an article, we have a title of the article and then we have the title of the journal. So there are always two titles in an article citation and a title and a book publisher in a book citation. Okay, so we need all of these things. We definitely don't need the author's birthday. And as I said, if you have a website, you definitely need the URL and the data access, but that's not enough. Alone, that is not enough. And sometimes volume, issue, and page numbers are not available because sometimes when things are published online, they've done away with the volume issues and sometimes even the page numbers because it's online and might be a rolling issue, constantly adding things to the journal, regardless of, they don't have to group them in order to print them, so they just publish them as they're received and approved. Okay. Now, to avoid plagiarism, give credit, and I just want to say I've been, unfortunately, at many meetings with students who were called to the Dean of Students office because they were told they had plagiarized. Some had done it on purpose, but many had done it by accident. And the professors still, turn them in. They don't know whether it was on purpose or by accident. And so this is really important that you not only not plagiarize, but not get accused of it, even when you don't mean to do it. So when you use a direct quotation, definitely, but hopefully you won't use too many of those. You'll use your own words. Okay. A lot of students, I see nobody saying cite every sentence, but a lot of students do that because they're afraid they're going to get accused of plagiarism. So they just put the same citation over and over and over. They could have one paragraph with the same reference in text over at the end of every sentence, just like sort of like to protect themselves, but that's actually incorrect. That's not correct either. So don't do that. If you have taken a lot of material from one source, write that paragraph and make it obvious from your writing that you use that one source for all of that information. Either put it right at the beginning or maybe at the end of the paragraph, but make it clear that that's all from a single source. And then you won't have to putting that citation at the end of every sentence. You only need the URL for an image taken from the web. Well, that's not the only case, of course, but you definitely do need a URL as well as a complete citation, even for an image taken from the web. Okay. Sometimes in academia, we don't worry too much about copyright infringement because it's for educational purposes. But if you were to take something and put it on your website, let's say, you might get a cease and desist letter from somebody. Telling you you're illegally using somebody's, music or image or whatever it is. Okay, that's good. So I just want to make sure everybody remembers that this is, if you take nothing else away from today, you must question the information you are getting, even when it's from the library. Sometimes things are wrong, people make mistakes, and you need to sometimes you have to do a fair amount of research to make sure that what you're looking at is real and correct. Okay. So this is my mantra. Who wrote this and why should I believe it? Who made this video and why should I believe it? Okay. Everybody's got some bias or another. So understanding people's biases are also helpful. It's okay to use material that has a certain bias. We do it all the time. It's hard to avoid bias in general, but have to be aware of it, right? So here's some ways to vet your information, not only for fake news, but just for any source and just who wrote it. When was it written? Is it very old? A lot of students forget to check the date, right? You may find an article, even a scholarly article that's quite relevant to your subject, but maybe it's 15 years old and it's about batteries. Hey, that's not where it's at right now, right? Is it a joke? Is it a con? Is it a scam? There are lots of websites that can help you with the scamming parts, right? Snopes, pointer.net, fact checking for all kinds of things. So if you've never heard of these, you can just Google, fact checking websites, scam checking, and you'll get many of them. Some of those are scams themselves, right? So it's good to get familiar with what's going on. Okay, even scholarly sources can be false, right? They can be false for a few reasons. One is person made a mistake, right? They miscalculated, or somebody in their lab was collecting the data the wrong way and the lab head didn't know it, and so they later oh my god, that wasn't right, and they retract their paper. On the other hand, there are also malicious events, right? In scholarly publishing, people want to very much to publish because that's how they get their tenure, and then sometimes they just cheat a little or force the data, and they get in trouble, and they get discovered, and they lose their jobs, they get their papers retracted. Some people have conflicts of interest that they don't disclose. You're supposed to disclose if you're working for a pharmaceutical company and you publish a paper about a particular drug study that you did, and maybe you're erring on the side of supporting the drug company that's funding you. That's not very good. It's supposed to be objective science. So you can go to retractionwatch.com and you'll see how many papers every day are retracted. It's sort of scary. Okay, so now we have the new world of deep fakes, right? So did the gorilla learn how to knit? How can you tell if the video is correct or the image? Like I said, you're free to Google, right? So one way to find out is do some research and see if you can determine what others have said about this image, if you can find something about it, instead of guessing. Want to see it again? gorilla looks pretty much like he's knitting, or she. Okay, so I Googled it and I found that this is a faked image, right? But I would say it's very difficult to tell from the picture, right? I don't think you can really tell. Okay, so as I mentioned before, we have a lot of research guides. We have one on evaluating sources. We have a lot of cute, short little videos and all these fact-checking websites that we have found, ways to identify bias and so on. A lot of websites, we used to call them content farms. I don't know if that term is in use anymore, but they're just designed to get traffic. I think we all know that now. In the beginning, it was hard to realize that that's what was happening, but they're writing stories that they hope will get traffic, and it doesn't really matter what the thing says as long as it gets you to click, right? So you have to be careful of those, especially when Googling. Okay, so my parting words are question everything. That is paramount. Evaluate what you're looking at. Organize, be organized in your work. Save your sources. I can't tell you how many students come to my desk or write me emails. Oh, I had the greatest source for my paper. I forgot to save the citation and now I can't find it again. Well, what was it about? Well, I don't remember the title. I don't remember the journal. I don't remember anything, but I do know my keywords. Well, millions of references are in our databases, so it's almost impossible to relocate it just by searching by keywords. So be organized, clip your citations right away. Who cares if you throw them out later or if you use them, at least you won't have lost things that might have been good. Don't forget to cite properly, being consistent, and using your own words. I should put that on here. And you'll do just great. And then I have a little survey I hope you'll take. But what I want to say before I say that is just how to find us on the library homepage. If you want to get to all of these help things, self-help, FAQs, you can search them. Like if you forgot completely how to find the full text, you found an article, but you don't know how to find it, you can just go here and you'll get this short description, and then it will lead you to our big help page with all of the details on how to find what you need to do. So the research guides can be really helpful. And one of the research guides, whoops, let's go back to the library homepage. If you want to find me, you can always do this. Need help, contact your librarian, and then you'll see the librarians and all the departments we're responsible for. We're on chat all day long. Here's the chat widget, right? And oh, it's offline. My colleagues, oh, it's not 9 o'clock yet, so nobody signed on, but most of the day we're on there and we're happy to answer your questions in any form you wish to send them to us, by email, by chat, or in class. And we used to do it in person, but now, oh, the library's open and somebody is there every day, but most people don't want to come in. And rightly so. I don't really want to go there either, but I do. Okay, so that's it. Let me just put this form. Here's the, whoops, here is the link to the feedback form, which I would just ask you to fill out. It's really quick. I'm putting it in the chat box. That would be very helpful to us. And if you have any questions, now's the time. If you have a paper due soon, please ask your questions. Maybe we have a couple of minutes left to try out anything that you want to just make sure you can do. And maybe with that, I'll just conclude, turn my video back on so you can see me. There's nothing I like more than helping students, I have to say. It's how I get my kicks. That may seem funny, but it is. And hey, you know, no stress. I'm not grading you, just helping you. Much like the Writing Center, we're here to help you with your get your best grades you can on your research and become a better researcher, which is a lifelong endeavor, I have to say. I'm still learning every day. Oh, I see the thank yous. You're quite welcome. And I guess I'll stop sharing and maybe I'll turn this back to one of the professors in case they want to say something. Let me do that. Does anybody need to present or no?
I don't think so. I'll just say this is Dan.
Okay.
For my students, I'm going to ask you, once you leave this chat, please join our classroom. I have a couple of announcements to make. But, if you have questions for Davida, please feel free to reach out to her directly. And,
Or you can email me.
Yep, okay. So email her or go join her on the chat sometime later. I'm sure she could always use the company. All right, so I'm going to head out. I'm going to take my students with me. Davida, thank you
Okay.
again.
Very good.
Nick,
Thank you.
Good.
Thank everybody for attending and for your attention. And I hope you learned something. You can use something you can use. Okay, I'm going to say goodbye.